Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Mesa City Council session for February the 21st. Mr. Luna is out of town representing the city in Mexico today, so we appreciate him doing that, and he's excused from this meeting. The first item on our agenda for this meeting is to review the items on the agenda for the February 25th regular council meeting. So, council, if you please refer to that document. As usual, the first couple of items are liquor license applications, followed by a healthy amount of bingo applications. The economy must be good if bingo applications are up. Various purchase contracts under item 5. Yes.
At 6D, dealing with the HUD funding, since I'm a member of a nonprofit, a board member of a nonprofit here, even to, the appearance of a conflict there, I'm conflicting off at 6D and remove it from the consent agenda.
Okay. All right, 60 will be off the consent. Mr. Thompson?
I'm also a non-paid board member on 2 of these, so I'll need to recuse myself as well.
Okay. All right, so agenda item 6D will be off the consent agenda because 2 of our council members are board members on some of the nonprofits that are receiving funds. Yes, Mr. Freeman.
Mayor, I have a question on 6E. Maybe Mr. Brady or Mr. McVeigh could kind of fill us in on 6E. Mr. Brady, kind of some of the dynamics behind there and how the compliance dates and requirement for construction or how that's moving forward with the grid. And I guess no construction would start until all the paperwork signed and moving forward. Anyway, I've left a message for Jeff. We just quite haven't connected on that. So maybe, Jeff, you could update us. Thanks.
Good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor. The updates for this project are that we are updating compliance agreements. That is to bring that into line. Up to this point, the developer has been moving forward with the bringing permits into the city. We've had several, actually two or three permit packages that have been brought into the city, but they've been on hold. The city has placed a hold on those permits until we have proof of financing, as well as knowing that we were having this development agreement amendment coming forward as well. The developer has signed their financing agreement. We are just awaiting the other end to actually close on the loan. I'm told that it's an imminent kind of situation where in the next week or two they will have funding and they'll be ready to move forward with construction on the project. There's a couple other things that we still have to work through. The changes that are included in this amendment also include the elimination of a new parking structure, which has resulted in some changes to the architecture of the building that's along Main Street. So we are going through the planning zoning clearance process as well to adjust for the changes in the building architecture. And we want to have that completed before we release the building permits as well.
I guess one of my thoughts was no construction is going to start until everything's all
correct.
The T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. And
correct, Vice Mayor. These represent city assets. This development proposal is a long-term lease, and we are not confident. We do not want to see the garage being cut. The garage being cut up to add that additional structural support, as well as scraping out the parking lot next to Benedictine University along Main Street, until we know that the project's fully funded and can be completed once it's started.
Good. Thank you.
I just want to be careful we manage expectations. I mean, we try and do all our due diligence before we issue permits, but that doesn't mean after projects start, other factors can take place. But we're being very careful here. And I should also mention that not only on the financing and demonstration of being able to deliver the project, but we're also making sure the quality of the project meets what was presented to council also. And I think we're going to have to have some discussions with the developer about that, about the amenities or at least the architectural features that were shown and what was being presented. So we're going to be in those discussions too. So there may be a little while before all this is approved, but these amendments are needed in order for the developer to have the assurance that some of the obligations regarding parking are adjusted for him.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Jen?
I just have one small comment, and just, I think it's more of on a typo thing, on 5B, on the dollar figure for the urban lakes. If we can just, I think that's 34,000, if we can just adjust that for public records, so it doesn't look possibly like 34 million.
Good. Make that comment to a,
Oh, change it to a period instead of a comma?
I don't like doing cents. I have a big problem with anything that goes in cents. It's a bad
Okay.
thing
All right.
on
so we'll-
contracts.
We'll
We'll adjust that. It'll be
adjust.
$34,601.50. I believe that's the number we're looking for.
Great. Okay, other comments, questions regarding agenda items for Monday? All right, if there's nothing else, then the next item on our agenda for this meeting is item 2A. That's to hear a presentation and provide direction on the proposed realignment of the paratransit service area. Jody, good to have you with us.
Good morning, Mayor, members of the council. I'm Jody Sorrell. I'm the Transit Services Director for the city. And we're here this morning to continue a discussion we started last April during the budget season to revisit our paratransit service area and look at realigning it to what the federal mandate is, which is 3/4 mile around a bus route or a light rail station. And we would look to do that implementation in July 1 of this year, along with the fiscal year. The big question we get is, why are we doing this? The current system we have serving citywide is just not sustainable in the long term. It's just the definition of a disability is getting broader. People are living longer, more people are entering the demographic. The cost for paratransit is continuing to increase. In January, we were notified by Valley Metro they had to, realign or renegotiate some stuff with our paratransit vendor. So our cost for paratransit service increased about $1.3 million for this year, taking it from $3.8 million to $5.8 million to $5.3 million as an estimate for this fiscal year. So that changes our cost per trip for fiscal year 19 is about $46 a trip, and that's for the city. The passengers pay $4 on top of that. And our estimated cost for fiscal year 20 is estimated to be about $48 a trip. And to put that into comparison, a trip on bus or rail is about $4.20. So this is our current transit service area. The lines in red are our current bus routes. The yellow line is our light rail alignment, and the blue area is our paratransit service area. What we are proposing is to take it to realign, to take it within our federal mandate. So the blue area now represents the 3/4 mile around a bus route, and the green area is where we would no longer have paratransit service, but we have an alternate service that we'll talk about here called Ride Choice, which would be offered citywide. So we're not leaving residents behind with no transit option. The impact is no current customer will be left stranded. They'll have a transit option. This 85% of our current customers will experience no change how they travel with this. So about 15% or about 300 people who are currently ADA certified, maybe not active users of the system, may be impacted. All ADA certified customers will continue to have access to paratransit for trips that begin and end within the federal mandate. So if you live outside the federal mandate, you may have to take Ride Choice to get into the federal mandated area. And all ADA paratransit certified residents in Mesa will have access to Ride Choice. So in Mesa right now, we have just under 4,000 residents who are ADA certified. About 584 of them live outside of the boundary area. There's about 2,000 unique paratransit riders a year, and those people take about 7 trips, an average of 7 trips a month on paratransit. Currently in our Ride Choice program, we have just over 1,000 people registered. 88 of those Ride Choice residents live outside of the service area, and our Ride Choice users take about 2.5, we'll round it up, 3 trips a month on Ride Choice.
Excuse me, Jody. Jeremy.
What's the difference between the Ride Choice and the paratransit?
I'll get to that in
Okay.
2 slides.
Okay.
If you can just give me, okay. So our outreach efforts, we sent letters to every ADA certified resident in Mesa, telling them about this change. We had TransDev just deliver put flyers on all the vehicles, so Mesa residents taking paratransit could get a flyer on the bus. And we did robocalls to residents in the affected area. So we intentionally did a layered, multi-pronged outreach, because understanding that probably just letters wouldn't get to everybody, so we tried to layer it to get to as many people as we can. We worked with Valley Metro to identify the high-frequency locations within Mesa where most of the trips are going, and we went out and met one-on-one with staff at those locations. We presented to the Transportation Advisory Board and the Human Relations Advisory Board. The Human Relations Advisory Board took a motion to support our recommendation. Valley Metro had a project webpage with a comment form so people could submit comments. We had 6 community outreach meetings throughout the area, and we accepted comments in person, on phone. We had about 75 people attend the public meetings, and we got about 90 comments back. And those comments ranged from, what is this Ride Choice program you're talking about, to just general complaints or concerns about paratransit, to actual concerns about some of the changes that we're recommending to implement. As I said, no customer, so this gets to the Ride Choice element. So Ride Choice is another option for our residents, and it differs from paratransit in that Ride Choice is a 24/7 service. Paratransit only operates when the transit system operates. So the paratransit operating hours are roughly 4 a.m. to 1 a.m. every day, so there's a limit. It's an on-demand service, so you can, when you need it, if you need it today at 11, you call and it's there, whereas paratransit, you have to book it 24 hours in advance. With Ride Choice, there is no shared ride requirement, and paratransit has a shared ride requirement. Ride Choice, in December, we added Lyft to the mix of Ride Choice options, and we're seeing well over 50% of our trips being taken on Lyft as an option. And the big thing for Ride Choice is it's $3 for the first 8 miles. And after that first 8 miles, it's $2 per mile after that for the customer. And Ride Choice is not just a Mesa-only program. There's 7 other entities in the valley that participate. So we had to get a service model that all 7 could agree on. And an initial 8-mile trip was what we could all agree on, because that's typically most of our average dial-a-ride trips are in that area. And as we go through the program, it will be evaluated to see if we have to adjust it and how that works out. The one change that a lot of people don't like if they live outside the service area is they have to take Ride Choice into the dial-a-ride service area now, so they're going back to making a transfer. Nobody, whether you ride bus or light rail, finds a transfer convenient. But the difference is, in this case, the passenger has the control to pick where they want to transfer. So if they feel more comfortable at their local coffee shop, at the local pharmacy, the grocery store, they have the control to decide where that transfer point is, where bus and light rail riders and other transit entities do not.
Jody, just to be clear, though, the transfer is only needed if they desire it. I mean, they could take
Correct.
Ride
Yeah, they have an option,
Choice
so
to their final
they
destination.
can take Ride Choice to their final destination. And if their final destination is 10 miles from their house, Ride Choice might be a better option in paying that additional $2. If it's 15 miles from their house, taking it into the Dollar Ride service area or paratransit service area and transferring might be a better option because now that cost is $7 as compared to, what did I say, 10 miles?
So eight
Plus
$2
$2 a mile for everything over 8.
Whereas paratransit for the fee of how much?
Paratransit is a flat fee of $4 a trip,
$4, but unlimited
unlimited.
distance, and that's why the cost, you can see why the differential in the cost that the city subsidizes for those trips is significantly higher than
Right.
the other. But we think a combination of the two is ideal, but that doesn't prohibit someone from taking Ride Choice if their destination is within 8 miles, and most likely, if it's in the city of Mesa,
Right.
they're probably not going to feel the impact.
Right.
Be better.
We'll cover most of it. There's going to be, we'll cover most of it. So these are all decisions and changes. And what we're recommending is offering paratransit citywide is an anomaly more than a norm. Nationwide, most transit agencies and communities will offer it just within the federal mandate because of the cost of the service itself. So if you give us the direction to move forward today, we're going to go ahead and work with getting all of our Ride Choice customers who are not currently ADA certified, getting them ADA certified. And I should say there's some people that, I think it's, some people that we've received some calls that are like, well, I won't be ADA certified. And I think they just have a certain image of, or expectation in their mind. They've created a definition of what an ADA certified individual is and has already lumped them into that, themselves into that group rather than getting certified. So we're encouraging everybody to go get certified. We'll help them with trip planning. So if somebody lives outside of the service area or somebody wants to travel into the service area, we'll help them, walk them through the steps they need to go, help them find options where a transfer might be acceptable for them, and help them with that. We'll continue our stakeholder and community outreach and trying to do as many one-on-one opportunities for people as we can. We'll continue pushing out letters, on-hold messages when you go to book your paratransit trip. And I think I covered the rest of this, and then we would implement on July 1, 2019.
Jody, you mentioned about being certified for ADA. Isn't that required in order to access paratransit services today?
It's already required. We
Okay.
require it for paratransit services
So that's not going to affect,
today.
anybody who's using paratransit
Anybody
today
who's
is
using-
already
Right, it's just
certified.
the people that are currently using Ride Choice that would have to go and get ADA certified so that they could take Ride Choice. They could qualify for the Ride Choice program in the future.
Okay, I'm sorry, so to use either program, you have to be ADA certified?
Right, currently, let me back up. So currently for Ride Choice, you do not have to be ADA certified.
Oh.
So if
Is
you're
that-
over
is that changing?
65, and that's changing because, and we're changing that because the addition of Lyft into the program opens up a whole broader range of potential customers who may choose. Ride Choice is intended, Ride Choice is intended to help people who do not have access to a car or are live outside of a transit area to get access. So we want to try to keep that in that confirmed area. Lyft adds a whole broader element to that aspect.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Whitaker?
So if I understand you correctly, Ride Choice, we're limiting it to ADA, but previously it was, what were the requirements to get onto Ride Choice
You had-
prior to?
You had to call and get registered, basically.
Like anybody or what?
Anybody who's over 65 or is disabled.
And we're ending that piece.
We're ending that piece and moving it to having to have to be ADA certified for that. When you get to be ADA, when you go to the Mobility Center and get ADA certified, we also offer those people that qualify who are ADA certified to get a bus pass that then we supplement that bus pass for them as well. So they have multiple options to using transit.
So before, it was to help individuals just over the age of 65 to subsidize their transportation. Do you know how many people will be affected by over 65 but don't meet the requirements for the ADA?
We know we don't know that specifically. We know we estimate there's about 400 people, 350, 400 people who are using Ride Choice now who are not ADA certified. We suspect almost all of those can get ADA certified, if not for many times you can get ADA certified because of health reasons, and people don't necessarily factor those health reasons into being ADA certified. When people hear ADA certified, most people in that particular generation, and I'm speaking because my father is a really good case, and he's disabled, but he doesn't consider himself ADA certified.
Okay. The other question I had was on the cost to the existing paratransit services. I believe it was, I don't see slide 3. So there's an increase of 1.3 million, and I think you said that last year it was 3.8 million?
Well, so this fiscal year 19, when we did our budget, we got an estimate from Valley Metro that our paratransit service would in total be 3.8 million. Mesa uses Prop 400 to fund a bulk of that paratransit service, and whatever our Prop 400 allocation doesn't fund, we fund out of our general fund. So that 3.8 was the number. We got 3.5 basically out of Prop 400, so what we had budgeted was a little over $222,000. Due to some negotiations that had to happen because of decreased ridership in paratransit, the vendor and Valley Metro renegotiated costs rather than the vendor ceasing the contract and going on. And that renegotiation to get them, Valley Metro, when they negotiated, increased our paratransit trips, increased our paratransit costs budget from the 3.8 to the 5.3. So that was a $1.3 million, $1.2 million unexpected
1.5.
hit to our budget that we
Yeah.
didn't expect.
I guess, is it literally just the contract price has gone up that much that they're passing along the cost then?
With paratransit, it's, so when we, in 2000, I have to go think fiscal year. So in July of 2017, when we changed the paratransit model. It used to be a cab-based model, and we changed it back to what is more of a traditional paratransit service model. When that happened, some of the ridership numbers from the former provider, that's what the current contractor used to put together their estimates for their staffing, what their cost for a trip would be. What was actually happening is that there were less trips than what was projected. People decided they didn't want to take paratransit anymore because they didn't want to have to share a ride. Sharing a ride, a lot of people for paratransit do not like it, so they will find a lot of ways around having to share the ride. But Mesa alone last year, we saw almost a 30% decrease in our number of trips, and we're about 40% of the paratransit service for East Valley. We provide about 115,000 paratransit trips a year. So that took us, we were at 130,000 before, and we lost about 15,000 trips. So that as the number of trips decrease, the cost per trip increases slightly because your demand is not there.
Well, and Jody, also that regionally, they're trying to take this same vendor and apply it across the entire region. And every community, I forget how many different plans there are out there that this vendor has to be able to respond to. It's like,
Right.
It's several plans. Metro has to manage a contract, but has to have a vendor who can respond to a variety of different communities. And so from a management standpoint, being able to resource it and have resources on standby. So we're paying for a lot of latent resources that are just sitting there waiting, because when the call comes in, there's a 24-hour notice, but they still have to have the drivers and the vehicles to get there. And so it's not regular, it's not like running light rail or bus where it just comes through and you just, regardless of if anybody's at the stop. This is a very different model, and those costs have gone up significantly in the last year, and that's why we see this change.
Right, it's a very labor-intensive model behind the scenes.
Mr. Freeman.
Hi, Jody. On slide 6, it talks about 85% of the customers are not going to be impacted by the change or experience no change. What about the 15%? What is that? What?
Some of those
I'm sure
15
you've kind of gone through it,
Yeah.
but let's revisit it.
So some of those 15%, which is about 300, and that's of our, I should back up, that's of our ADA certified people. Not all those that are actually certified use the service. They may have it as a backup, like some of us, know our bus route as a backup if our car breaks down. Some of those folks will have to look at making a transfer. So they'll have to look at taking, if they live outside the service area, they'll have to look at taking ride choice into the service area and then transferring to paratransit.
If they
Or-
choose.
If they choose,
This is,
or
let's
they
make
can
sure,
take ride
it's not a
choice.
mandatory issue, they have to transfer. They can do
Right.
the trip within the 8
If
miles.
they can do the trip within the 8 miles, then they can take ride choice, and that will be their change, is they will change from paratransit to ride choice if their trip is less than that 8 miles. And our average dollar ride trip is about 8.5 miles right now. So,
So a follow-up question with that, I'll just stop you there. So let's just take the scenario on slide 9. You got $3 for up to an 8-mile trip, $2 per mile after. If I had a 10-mile, need to do a 10-mile ride choice trip, what would that cost me per trip?
it would cost the consumer $5. And a paratransit trip would cost $4.
It'd be 8 plus 2
No, it
miles
would be
more.
$3. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
3 plus.
I think the math is a
See,
little
math,
higher than
Candace
that.
is sitting behind me going, let me help you with the
So
math.
I think it'd be 7.
Candace, you want to help her?
It would be $7, which is the same as it would be $7, and a paratransit trip is $4.
So if I made a round trip, now just the $3 up to an 8-mile trip, right? That's
Right.
one way.
Right,
So if I came back to my home, that's $6.
that's $6.
And then if I was 2 miles beyond that, that's $2 per mile.
Yeah.
2 mile more, yeah.
$2.
So
per mile.
that's 6 plus 4 plus another 4 for that round trip. So it's $14?
Right.
Correct.
$14 round trip. So that could be kind of expensive if you have a limited income factor.
Yes.
But, okay, I'm just trying to weigh this all in.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, just to continue with that example, though, if you were at 8 miles or less, it'd actually be a better system for you, because instead of paying $4, you're paying $3.
Right.
Correct.
And you can
Instead
do
of
it
being 6,
one
8
way.
versus 6. yeah.
Right, but you save $1, as long as you're within the 8-mile boundary, and you don't have to share a ride with anyone, and you can call anytime instead of scheduling it days in advance.
There's no doubt built into this model is the assumption that you stay within kind of the city of Mesa limits. That
Yeah.
those services can be provided somewhere between that 8 and 10 mile range, that if you are taking trips within the 8 to 10 mile range, then this is probably very similar as far as the cost. And so that's how model is kind of set up. If you want to go extensively outside the 10, go 15 miles, if you need to go to downtown Phoenix or whatever, then the idea is you take the ride choice into the paratransit area, you transfer then to paratransit, and you get to choose, right? You get to choose where, you may do it at the Starbucks, you may do it whatever, where it's convenient for you, and arrange for paratransit then to transfer and pick you up at that location, and then take you the rest of the distance. And in some cases, the math would work out that may be a cheaper option than taking ride choice and paying that, after the 8 miles, paying that $2 per mile.
So the folks we're worried about are the 15% that lie in our current list of folks that we serve that lie outside of that federal mandated area.
Those are the primary ones, the ones
Right.
that we know about. There's a few smaller trips that happen from inside the service area, so you may live inside the service area and travel outside the service area.
So, but within that 15%, some of those folks are going to be 8-mile
We believe that.
Right, we believe they'd be
And
8
so
miles.
So at least half of those are probably.
We could
within
make the
mile.
argument that by making them more aware of ride choice, we're actually saving them money and giving them a more flexible opportunity.
It is a much more flexible option.
So the people who are really going to be hurt here are that 15% that travel long distances.
Yes.
And the inconvenience that we're going to impose on them is that they're going to have to take a $3 ride to get to their $4 ride.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have
Or they-
statistics on the number of rides that are under 8 miles and the ones that are over 8 miles?
We don't have that specific for today. We can get that. The average number of, like I said, our average trip is about 8.5 miles. So there's a large quantity below that. And then there's, but I don't know, we don't have specific what that is.
The average of all trips is.
The average of all the paratransit trips in Mesa. And that, if I can go back, one thing I forgot to say about Ride Choice is in Ride Choice, so Ride Choice starts with, start with a 10 one-way trip limit a month. And as you can see by our average trips, 2.5 trips, 3 trips, most people are well within that. We do make an exception of 50 one-way trips a month if you're taking it to work, school, or medical trips. And that is 90% of our paratransit service by itself is people going to work, school, or medical. So we've tried to make the accommodations as much as we can.
And what's the cost on the city side for Ride Choice?
It
and
costs us
Paratrip
$18 to $20 a trip.
versus
Versus
$40?
46.
Okay.
Mr. Thompson?
Well, I think my concern really is, in District 6, when you look at District 6, District 6 is going to be probably impacted the greatest. And if you have someone that lives, for example, in either around Southern and Meridian, or if you live out in Sunland Springs, or Sunland Villages out of Signal Butte, if you're trying to get to our downtown, that's, 15 miles away. And, which is much greater than that 8-mile trip that's covered. So you'd have, somebody that has an ADA issue that's going to have to travel, 6 miles or so, and then transfer onto the Ride Choice to get,
They'll start on Ride Choice.
start on Ride
Right.
Choice
And
go to
I'm sorry, and go into paratransit to get to our downtown.
But they get to call and make that travel. I mean, it's not as easy as one trip, but the difference is $18 versus $45 for the city. And they get to choose, and we will work with them. We'll have staff actually go and meet them and show them where those transfers could take place. And then they could arrange for paratransit to show up at a specific time. It's not convenient, but if you're riding bus and light rail and using public transit, you're probably going to take a transfer on those also. So we're trying to balance out all of that, and we recognize it's not convenient for everyone. But the majority of those who are using these services, these child ride services, we don't think there'll be a significant impact. But there are a few, and that could be significant, and what we propose to do is literally go meet with each one of them, and we've been doing that, and actually have staff walk with them and start from their home and show them how they could make this happen as we get transitioned to this new.
Would there be, and Jody, I'm sorry, I should have
No,
probably
sorry.
asked this before, but is there an opportunity to maybe extend out to Signal Butte and Baseline and make that like a pickup point there? Because right now it looks like they extend at least out to Sunland Springs at Guadalupe or at Baseline and Sossaman. Would you be able to have another node maybe out, like a single location pickup to help those 15% or what have you that are, that otherwise wouldn't have that opportunity?
Yeah, I don't know how the federal rules read once we start making exceptions. We're really just trying to say, we're going to comply only with the federal rules, and I don't know what happens when we start, I don't want to use discriminate, but create one-offs, and then if someone says, well, wait a minute, I live somewhere else here, is that different? I don't know. We could look into that, but I think it could be problematic.
It's a bus route that you're referring to.
Well, if you're setting up like a way station, you might as well, you're going to be in a car to Signal Butte and Elliott anyway. I mean, you might as well just go another, you're going to be in a car either way.
Yeah, it depends on if you have an ADA issue, that transfer can be kind of burdensome for people.
Well,
But it's gonna happen
the
regardless.
transit service will take them from wherever they're being dropped off and physically meet them
Right.
and help them into the car. So
The
there is
intent-
a different service.
If I can, the intent of paratransit is to provide equal access to transit and to provide an equity for all of our transit riders across the board. So that's the other reason why we're looking at this, is to provide equity for the bus riders in East Mesa as well who don't have access to transit, who might need it.
Well, paratransit is kind of like, once you have transit services, bus or light rail, the federal government then says, okay, that may not be convenient for everybody who has ADA, so you then have this service that overlaps it, I guess, is a better way of saying those services, and that's why this program is set up. When we started off, we just allowed it to continue throughout the whole city. But as you can see from our numbers and the recent increases, it's becoming very expensive for the city, and we just don't think it'll be sustainable in the long term. And so we're trying to figure out reasonable approaches, and frankly, with Right Choice gives us some, as everybody knows, that's becoming, an opportunity. We're trying to combine the two and see if we can provide those services.
Mr. Heredia, and then Mr. Whitaker.
Jody, you touched on other cities or nationally as far as the movement towards reducing the size, or what is the other cities? Do they employ the whole city service area, or are they reduced to that? What is it, third? To the 3/5 mile? Three-quarters miles?
So when ADA was passed in 1990, almost every transit agency in the country kept it within that 3/4 mile boundary because it was an expensive service. So you can go to pretty much any major city in the country, and if they have transit service in there, their paratransit service area will most likely stay within that 3/4 mile boundary. There's some areas, like in the valley, when that made the decision to offset those costs for paratransit and fund it citywide. Most cities in the valley, let me rephrase that. In the West Valley, they almost all do operate within that 3/4 mile rule, and they have very limited bus service. The city of Phoenix has a limited boundary for where they provide paratransit, as does the city of Scottsdale. So the other cities that provide it citywide really are Mesa, Chandler, and Gilbert. I don't want to speak for those communities, but I know their staff is watching to see where we go with this. The county has other paratransit issues, and they're going to have to go back and make some significant changes to their paratransit program. They just are working through that process now. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. And then another question, I know a lot of the paratransit vehicles are equipped for handling wheelchair accessibilities. Are we reducing the capacity for folks with wheelchairs to get a ride with Right Choice?
No, we do have, so Right
what's
Choice
the-
has a vendor. Right Choice is operated by a vendor called ALC. I always say it wrong. ALC. And so when somebody wants to book Right Choice, they have contracts with Lyft, cab companies, and other companies in the valley that provide wheelchair accessible transit. So they've worked out all those agreements. And so when somebody wants to take Right Choice, they call that number, they book the trip. They are told at the time of booking how far the trip is and how much the trip will cost them. And then the trip is billed to a credit card that's on file. So when the individual gets to their destination, there's no fumbling with money, no having to have to worry about paying anybody, which is a concern we've had with some of the existing Right Choice program, or the former Right Choice program. So it's all taken care of. It's just, you get in, you get out.
So there are
wheelchair
accessible
Yes.
vehicles out there?
Yes.
With Right Choice, okay,
Yes.
perfect.
Mr. Whitaker.
I think this is my last question. The budget amount of the 3.8 million for the last fiscal year, what is the anticipated cost if we switch over to this hybrid approach?
I just put in my budget for fiscal year 20 where we incorporated this into it, and it's about the total budget, because the city's input is different, is about 4.3 million, 4.4 million, I believe.
So it's down a little bit.
It's down a little bit. And some of that money was, the Right Choice estimate went up, our estimate for that went up, anticipating we would have more people taking Right Choice. So it's kind of balanced out a little bit.
And what portion of that has to come out of our general fund budget versus the
For-
Prop 400?
For paratransit, the part that's coming out of our general fund budget is about $700,000 or $800,000.
And if we switch over to this other approach?
Well, that is the budget number for this approach. So if we stayed with our current number, we would need to increase our budget. And our budget increase into that would probably, I'd have to figure, because we'd have to refigure the trip costs and stuff, but it would go up probably from the existing fiscal year 19 budget of 5.3 million, it would probably be way in excess of $6 million. Maybe,
But you're saying, and when you said before, is that was about another $1.5 million more than we had originally, 1.3 than we had budgeted.
Than we had
So you're
budgeted.
probably going to be asking for $1.5 million or more.
probably,
Okay.
Oh, that's from the general fund?
Yes.
yeah.
Got it.
Okay, we do have several, thank you, Jody.
Yeah.
We do have several cards from folks who would like to speak. First is Mary Hartle. That's a good question.
Testing, testing. Okay,
Welcome, Mary. We can hear you. Go ahead.
okay. My name is Mary Hartle, Hartle, and I live in West Mesa in District 1. And I have a number of concerns about changing these to the federally mandated boundaries. First of all, it's very difficult to get cabs out in the east or north part of the city, parts of the city. And it's even difficult to get cabs on the west side of Mesa, which is where I live, and for ride choice. We've just lost one of the cab companies, Yellow Cab, is no longer going to provide ride choice service. So that means even fewer cabs being available. So that's one concern, that it'll be so difficult to get a cab out to the East Valley to service people. Then number two, I won't be able to attend my church using Dial-A-Ride anymore because it will be outside of the boundaries. And the paratransit is more dependable in terms of like help, trying to find somebody at like a church which is usually a big place. It's the right choice is just not as dependable about finding you, especially Lyft. They will only stay there a very short time, and they don't try to come and look for you. My other concern is that there are a lot of people who are losing vision out in, throughout Mesa. And I am trying to serve those persons to teach them alternative ways of doing daily tasks that are non-visual in nature, non-visual techniques. And I need Dial-A-Ride to get out to their homes. And in the East Valley or the north part of the city, I won't be able to do that. and it will be difficult to make the change to be able to connect up with Dial-A-Ride and, you know, and the right choice. And then my last comment is that there was no effort to make the map that they sent out accessible to people who are blind. So that I spent at least a half an hour trying to get my reader to explain to me where the changes were. If they had provided a written written explanation of what the changes were, that would have helped those of us who are blind or visually impaired. And I have a question. What will be done with the money that you save from the paratransit program? How will the city use that money? So I don't know if
Okay.
anybody has an answer to that question.
Thank you, Mary. Mr. Brady, maybe you could address that. Is there money that's being saved, and if so,
Well,
how is that, where
there's
is that
not-
money going?
No, this is, I think, the challenge here for us. It's not money being saved. It's money that, the challenge for us is that the increasing cost is taking money away from other services in the city that we would otherwise fund. So it's, the challenge is the rising cost is now allowing us to, fund other activities in the city, whether it's public safety or parks and recreation or whatever it might be. So there's not necessarily a savings per se. It's frankly, we're trying to control the cost. And I guess the question too is, if you're inside the service area, I guess I'm confused, Jody, why, if she lives inside the service area, isn't paratransit available to her?
Yes, it is, but I think Mary's Mary's church might be outside the service area.
Well, but
So
if you start off with
if you start in the paratransit area, paratransit will not take you outside of the paratransit
Gotcha.
area. So paratransit will only operate within the service area.
So Mary would have to make a transfer.
Yes,
Okay,
or take ride choice the whole way.
yeah.
Have we had any other challenges about ride choice? I guess that was a concern too, about the performance.
We haven't really had, we changed the model in December. I think we haven't had, in our back up, in reviewing our comments and concerns, there's not a lot listed. We haven't gotten a lot of negative feedback from it. We have a lot of people, I think like any service, and it was just implemented in December, so it's going to have some adjustment period in there. It's not going to come out, no service comes out of the gate perfect off the bat. I think where a lot of people are struggling is in the former ride choice service, it was primarily cab-based, and you had a relationship with a cab driver who would come and pick you up, and that option isn't available anymore. And the cab industry, because of impacts like Lyft and Uber, the amount of the size of the cab industry is starting to decrease significantly.
Mary, do you mind if I ask, where is your church?
Where's my church? 2213 North Lindsay Road
In Mesa.
in Mesa.
So would that's outside of the 8-mile service area from her
I don't
home?
know.
No, it's not outside the 8 miles, but when I've tried to use ride choice to prepare for the, change in July, I've had more difficulty getting rides back from church. And a couple times, like the office managers had to take me home, and that's out of her way to go home. And I haven't been able to find other church members that go west.
I think we can look into that as an operational.
Thank you.
I'm happy to look into that with ALC.
Seems like the reliability of,
Yeah, Metro, we need to talk to Metro about
Right.
that, having that availability, yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Mary, thank you very much.
Okay.
We have.
Let me listen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr.
Mary.
Freeman has a question for you, Mary.
Jody, probably one of her other concerns was she likes to go visit and mentor other people who have vision problems. Is that correct? Did I hear that? So you actually leave the paratransit area, and how do you make those connections is what I'm asking, Mary.
Well, if this goes into effect, then I'll have to try to transfer to Ride Choice, and it will be, more expensive because there's more than 8 miles of territory to cover in Mesa. Then, between the boundary that would, between the boundary for the dial ride service area and the part that is just Ride Choice. So it will make it very difficult for me to get to see people.
So Jody, is there any way that we can help her understand that and better make the connection points? Or
Right, we can work with Mary to identify where she's going and where the
what are the best options for her?
what her best options are for
Well,
that.
we'll
yeah.
actually have staff go.
Yeah, that's part of our outreach plan, is to work with people to help them identify, because some people might feel comfortable making a transfer, like Chris said, at Starbucks. Some people might feel more comfortable at the local grocery store, or Macy's at Super City, so we'll try to help them identify where they feel comfortable doing that.
So she mentioned her vision, trying to read the documents that you sent out. Is there any way Braille is sent out or some other type of?
Valley Metro, I have to look into that, because Valley Metro, this was on the Valley Metro website.
Okay.
And so, there was a special page set up, so that information should have been there. When I looked, I thought it was there, but I will go back and follow up.
Well, and the
with
individual responsible for that is also
that. Is also visually
vision
impaired.
impaired, so we can,
Yeah.
there's some there can help out.
Yeah, so make sure she has the documents that she can.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson has a question for you, Mary.
Not so much a question, but a statement, and your pain with Lyft, I feel your pain with Lyft, and, my mother, who has dementia, uses Lyft quite often, and, and her Lyft drivers have either went off and left her stranded, or would drop her off down the street, leaving her to wander to wherever it is that she's supposed to go, because they don't come in and ask for you, they don't wait around. If you're not there ready for pickup when they pull up, they just cancel the ride and keep going. So to her point, Jody, I think we need to have that conversation with Lyft. I know that I've had that conversation with Lyft. My sister and I both called their vice president of their company in San Francisco and had that discussion with them. But I think it would behoove of us, if we're going to be relying on this as a service, that they understand we cannot have vulnerable people being dropped off or left stranded in our city.
I think we would all agree with you on that. And one of the benefits that we have with this program is, if people tell us of the bad experience they have, we can research the trip. And if it's a Lyft trip, we have the ability to tell the vendor has the ability to tell Lyft, that person doesn't drive for us anymore. So we have the control to kind of start weeding out some drivers that, who aren't doing probably what they're supposed to do, and kind of a different level of accountability for that.
Frankie.
And Jody, is there specific training that folks in the paratransit, Ride Choice go through for being eligible to pick up folks that are asking for their service?
Yeah, so the paratransit drivers, and that's partly why the cost is high. The paratransit drivers, as part of the federal requirement, they have to be trained on this area and working with passengers in this capacity. Ride Choice is not a federally mandated program that we have to offer. If we chose to, we could say we're not going to offer Ride Choice anymore. But it's So there is some expectation, and I know Lyft does, because when we were starting to go through this program, I'm pretty sure I'm like a 2-star rider on Lyft right now, because I'd get on and grill the drivers, like, so why do you drive? What kind of training do you get? And so Lyft does do some training, and for, all the drivers told me, like, when they look at the, this demographic in this market to serve, that Lyft kind of pulls them out and gives them some extra training, not as extensive as what they would get on a paratransit.
I did have one question for Mary. I see that she's seated. So I was just curious of the overall trips that she takes. How many would, like, 80% be within the area? I mean, how big of an impact is this on her commutes?
Right now, I'm taking more trips inside the area. So I've got it right. Right. Right now, I'm trying to stand out to East Valley more.
So Mary, let me repeat this and see. Most of her trips are within the service area, but she's trying to expand her training more out into the East Valley.
I think working with her on those ones outside of the area and evaluating from there, keeping track of the Lyft drivers and making sure we have the input and that controls. But I do see a benefit also in the 24/7 accessibility of transportation inside the service area versus the paratransit, which is 24 hours of planning. So although there are inconveniences, there are benefits as well, and we appreciate the continued input to make sure that we're serving our residents.
Thank you. We do have 4 other cards. Next, Connie Ryan.
Trip over the dogs.
Take your hand.
Yeah.
Going the wrong way.
I don't need to sit.
You need the microphone.
Yeah, okay. Oh, so we face that one? Okay. Thought we faced the audience. All right. Okay. Audience.
Got it?
Yes.
Okay.
Microphone?
Connie, let me take your hand. There you go.
All right. Oh, little tiny microphone, okay. Yeah, okay. All right, my name is Connie Ryan, and I live across the street from Mary at 155 West Brown in District 1. And my concern was mostly for other people. I don't, at this point, travel outside of the area. I go to Tempe 2 days a week, and Dial-A-Ride's fine for that. But I'm concerned that there's an individual that should be here but isn't, that might need some work. He works, the statistics you take are the people who live in these areas, but I don't know if you've taken any with people who need to travel outside of the service area. And there are people who live in the regular service area but work outside of it. And I have a person that I'm acquainted with who has an intellectual disability and lives in Southwest Mesa and works up at Lindsay and McAllop's. And so if he took ride choice, he would have to take pay the $4 for paratransit plus another $3 for a Dial-A-Ride, and that's $7 each way. That's $14 a trip. That's quite a lot of money. And I don't know, and this person has this job over there, and he's had it for many years, and it would be very hard for him not to be able to get there. And that's mostly that is what I'm concerned about, and also the idea of if there was a description, a verbal description of the map on that website. It wasn't, I looked on the website and I couldn't find it. I don't know, maybe there was another page and we weren't directed to it, and maybe that's my error, but, you know, a verbal description along with a letter would have been really great. And that would have, we would have, well, is it the area or isn't it the area? Who knows, right? You know, and we have discussions with it. I was with a person with a visual impairment yesterday on paratransit, and she was, you know, she can read, but she was even confused, and sighted people are even confused with that map. So there should be a verbal description for everybody, and I think that's the main two things that I had. Oh, the other thing is, again, with Mary talked about the unavailability of cabs. I prefer cabs to Lyft. I got here with Lyft, but the poor man was so flustered, he didn't know what to do. It was two blind ladies. He tried and he got us here, but he didn't know where anything was. You know, if there was, all he had was his GPS. He said, I don't know where it is. I don't know. And you know, he was a nice man. He was trying really hard, but he had no idea what to do with two blind ladies who couldn't direct him physically. And we were going to bring another lady with us who isn't blind, but she's never been here and she couldn't direct. You know, so that's now some of the cabs. Yellow dropped out. I used to use VIP, but VIP, if they can't accept the call, they don't. If they figure they can't cover it, they don't. So I wish somebody would talk to those people. And Yellow Cab is gone. And I don't know, I haven't used Total Ride in a long time because they didn't have enough cabs to cover. And I hope that you will talk to some of the cab companies and have, because I do use Lyft, but I really prefer the cabs. And I guess I think that was all I was going to say. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Connie. Any questions for Connie? Thank you. I can see how disruptive and how scary this is for the folks who are using the service. And it seems like there's some good answers, but there's going to require a lot of city staff interaction on a case-by-case basis. For example, the gentleman that she was referring to that lives in Southwest Mesa but works in Central Mesa, it could very well be that the new situation might be to his advantage, but it's going to take a lot of individual conversations to get over the change is scary. And so to me, the question is, do we have the capacity at a staff level to deal one-on-one?
We think we do, Mayor, and the more this moves forward, it actually gets people to realize this is getting closer, and it actually helps us pull people to come forward. If that becomes a problem, we'll support
Right.
Jody in getting the resources from Metro and others to handle those, because you're right, most of these now that we're dealing with are going to have to be handled on a one-on-one basis, and I think that's where we're headed, and that's where we want to get to, is so that each and every individual that has a concern, we can actually go with them and go through the route and help them out.
Okay. Thank you very much. Connie Ryan.
Connie just spoke.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Thank you. And excuse me. Thank you. Angela, and I'm going to mispronounce your name, Angela. Angela Shadati. Okay. Thank you, Angela. It's Sarhadi. correct?
Sarhadi.
Thank you. Welcome.
Okay, let's see. I'll scooch up a little closer. So my name is Angela Sarhadi. I live in District 1, and I own a business in District 6 at Signal Butte and Baseline, Superstition Gateway Shopping Center. I've been quite involved with this process because it affects me directly, but more so because I know it affects many people who haven't had the opportunity or don't have the capacity potentially to talk on their own behalf. I've been riding Dial-A-Ride for many, many years. I've lived in Mesa in total 20 years. And this is a huge change for everybody who's used to using paratransit. There's so many facets to this decision that I wrote you all an email this weekend asking you to consider postponing this decision to next year because I think it needs to be studied more, and I think that it impacts more than we really know right now. I know that Jody spoke about the 300 or so that are affected in Mesa. I'm not one of those 300, but I am someone who's affected. Obviously, Signal Butte and Baseline is 3-4 miles outside of the service area. It's 14 miles from my home to my business, and I live and work in the city limits of Mesa. That's not even the furthest distance that you could travel in Mesa. It's probably, towards the further end of it, but maybe 20 miles. I mean, you all know how big Mesa is. So 14 miles, it will cost me $15 each way to go just to work from home if I continue on Ride Choice. And transferring for me is not an option because not only is it the cost, but it's the time involved. There's a half-hour window that you're given when you transfer onto, or when you take a paratransit service. So say I go from my home to Starbucks, and then I go from Starbucks to my work, I'm adding in an extra half hour at least at Starbucks where I'm waiting, for that second ride to come and pick me up. And then they may have to pick up other people, drop off other people, It's just not feasible for people who have to work on a schedule or have to be at a doctor's appointment at a specific time or have to be at any appointment, really. I think that people who drive take it for granted that you can get from point A to point B, and all you have to plan for is your trip time, how long it takes you to drive there. So there's lots of facets to this decision, which is why I think I'd like you to consider postponing your decision about this until later. Ride Choice for me is actually very feasible. I use it a lot. I love it, but I'm able to use it. And not everybody who is ADA eligible is capable of getting on a regular, a Lyft ride. The Lyft drivers are not trained to deal with people with all disabilities. Right now, Ride Choice is a point-to-point, door-to-door service, meaning the drivers will actually walk you up to your door, to your destination, to make sure that you get in. So think about people with developmental disabilities who might just get dropped off at the curb by a Lyft driver. Then they're left to fend for themselves to get from there to their day facility or wherever they might be going. They could get lost. They could get hurt. They're vulnerable. There are lots of riders on this program that are vulnerable who can't take Lyft as an option. So the core problem here, I think, is that TransDev is an expensive provider. Their contract will be up, and I would urge everybody who's involved in voting on these contracts to really analyze these contracts in the future. As a rider, I was so disappointed that they got the contract because their service quality is inferior, and apparently their expense is out of this world compared to other options, like the cab options. Cab companies are going out of business. We've already mentioned two. Apache Taxi was one that I took when I used to take Ride Choice a while back, and they're completely out of business. So it is pushing more towards Lyft. It's, these cab companies can't sustain, obviously, in this, things change. Buggy wheels go out of business, and so. I feel like I have to stand up for people who can't on their own, so that's why I'm here. For me, it'll be a cost of going from, $4 each way to $15 each way to go to work. And that's just one example. There was a woman who was on the news, and Channel 15 interviewed her regarding this process a few weeks back. And she travels from Mesa to a blind services center in Phoenix for services to learn how to adapt to her disability. They teach things like Braille and life skills and how to cook, with a visual impairment, really important services. And there's only a few of them, and they're all in Phoenix. So if you live in an uncovered area in Mesa, her example was, I believe, $45 each way that it will cost her to go get these services. I hope she's here today to speak for herself, but there are people who go to the Mark Center on Signal Butte and Southern, and to my knowledge, all of their patrons are going to be affected by this. These are people with developmental disabilities who go there for a day program. It's their work. I've spoken to many of them on rides, and it's their life. They take such pride in being able to go to a job and feeling like their life is like everybody else's. And it's going to make it impossible for families to be able to pay for transportation like this. So I would urge you to wait till next year to make this decision. In the meantime, spend some time educating and helping people to transition from the very expensive paratransit system onto the Ride Choice program. And those who can will. I was actually surprised. I'd never heard this before Jody said it today, but I didn't realize that the cost goes up when ridership goes down. To me, it seems that it would be linear, but I can understand why now. I think TransDev was a really poor choice for that program, and I think that now we're going to have to pay for it as Mesa ADA certified ride choice or paratransit riders. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Angela. Questions? Yes, Jeremy.
The only question I have, I think it sounds like, from what you're saying, the main issue with the ride program is the fact that it would only go 8 miles, and it creates an issue when you have to get off and stop, and then the time transfer from each one of those. Do you believe the people that you're representing here today, that problem would be solved if we increased the miles from, say, 8 miles to 15 miles or 20 miles, or, I don't know what that cost becomes if we increase the amount of miles that you're allowed to travel on the rideshare, but some form of middle ground, would you say that if we increased those miles to a specific number, that would satisfy or solve the problem?
It would solve it for me, because I'm fully capable of using, Ride Choice. Not everyone is. I'm thinking of people with severe developmental intellectual disabilities who need that door-to-door handoff. Honestly, I thought if you kept the Ride Choice program and you expanded the rules, so you eliminated the restrictions, the 8 miles, because it's still cheaper. Obviously, it's less than, more than half the price of what you're paying for the paratransit. So even if they were allowed to, make longer trips, it's still cheaper for the city. So for me, eliminating that and eliminating the 50 trips per month limitation. If you go to work 5 days a week, you only have 3 more round-trip trips you can make in a month before you have no more Ride Choice service at all. So most of us actually go other places than work. I mean, just think about your own lives and your own days. How many places do you all go? I know just for work, I travel from one point to another. I may have an off-site meeting, I may have an off-site training. I mean, that sucks up another one of those 50 allotted rides. So eliminating those and eliminating the 8-mile restriction would work for me. It's still not an ideal program for everybody.
I think when you say not ideal, the main issue that I hear you speak about is the fact that they don't hand you off to the door. They'll actually just drop you off in the car like we experienced this morning.
Yeah.
So I guess my question for Jody or for staff would be, is it possible to go back to Valley Metro and change the requirements of ride choice to say you have to actually escort the person to the door? And the second thing I would say is, I assume Valley Metro keeps the statistics on the miles of every single one of these trips. I'm assuming that's part of the federal
Right.
requirements. So it would be easy enough to just go back and do the math, right? I mean, you
Well-
could see exactly how many miles were traveled and what that cost is gonna be.
So backing up, Ride Choice is not a federally required program. So they don't have to keep a lot of the federal stats that are required by paratransit. Ride Choice is a program we choose to offer. We choose to opt in at Valley Metro as a transit option for our residents. At any time, the council could say, we don't want to offer Ride Choice anymore, it's too expensive. Right. So just to make that clear. Any changes that we wanted to make to the operational part of Ride Choice, as far as extending the miles, anything like that, we would have to go and work with the 7 other entities that participate in Ride Choice. We couldn't just do it on our own. And that's part of the changes to Ride Choice in order to manage the cost of the program, because there is a point, because what we have is our region, our average trip is 8.5 miles. The county's average trip is 16 miles. So there's some differences in there that we have to compromise to get to maximize our costs, because if everybody's starting to do unique programs like we have in paratransit, that adds to those administrative costs, and then the cost efficiency is gone. So there are some limitations and some regional negotiations that would have to take place.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
I
Mr.
do.
Freeman?
Jody, Angela brought up a good question. What would be the impact if we postpone this decision till next year? Didn't do anything about it today?
It's
It'd be just the cost of the
cost, and
everything.
those costs will increase. And I think the challenge we have too is that we lose the momentum of all the public hearings and outreach we've done. And we certainly can do that, but there's been a lot of work that's being done. We would, listen, this is a tough decision. It impacts a lot of people, but there are communities that don't provide the service at all outside the 3/4 mile area. We've been doing well above and beyond, and we're trying to figure out a way to adjust that in a way that's reasonable and try to be less impactful to those who are used to the service today. Again, if we delay it, we'll have to start over again, going through all the notices and the process. And so we could do that, but it just means resetting and starting over again.
Got it. I guess the other part, was there a committee that was formed to look at this? I mean, how did you assess your information, gather it all, and the information from users as well?
We've had these
statistics?
discussions internally for off and on for the 12 years I've been at the city.
Yeah, I think council 6 years ago asked us to start looking at bringing, or 4 years ago,
Right.
or to begin. I mean, even Mayor Smith will remember that the council started asking those questions, because these costs have been escalating significantly over the last 5 or 6 years. And so if you look and see what we were paying for dial ride services 6 years ago, it's a fraction of what we see today. And so council began asking us to look at an opportunity to look at adjusting these. And I think in the last 2 years, it takes that long. You know, council said, okay, let's go do this. Let's start looking at it. What's the process? And so with that green light, we went out and started the process, and that's led us to here where we are today.
And Councilman Freeman, just on that note, is we didn't form like a specific committee of our residents, but Valley Metro has a committee, I forget the name of it. It's the Valley Metro Accessible Transit Advisory Board, and this information was presented to them and has been shared with them, because they, since we buy our service from Valley Metro, this group, just like the board of directors, would represent the sounding board, if you will, for paratransit and disabled transportation in the region.
Who's our board representative now?
I'd have to go back and look. It's, our board representative at Valley Metro is Councilmember Heredia. Yes. He's going to a second meeting today.
Well, and
So
Jody,
he has some work to do.
Jody, this was also vetted by our Human Relations Advisory Board.
Yes, we went to the Human Relations Advisory Board, and we met with Mark Tompert at the Mark Center before we went to the Human Relations Advisory Board because we knew that it would impact their residents, and Mark expressed he understood and would share the information with his staff. And the Human Relations Advisory Board passed a motion to support this recommendation. They understood what the sustainability factor of this service.
You know, it's interesting because I spoke to the president of the Mark Center, and he said he hadn't heard of this. And then I contacted the head of the Freestone Center, which is the one at Signal Butte and Southern, and they hadn't heard of this change. Yeah, so.
I don't control their internal
Yeah,
communication.
yeah, I know. Interesting though, but
Yeah.
the president wouldn't have heard of it. I guess that's all I have to say. But I think that a transition process is beneficial because so many people. I mean, it sounds like they're going to have to do a ton of handholding to kind of get people to transition into using this new type of service anyway. And if that happened before you made the decision, I think it would go over a lot better. If you could transition more people onto using Ride Choice ahead of time than just July 1st, implementing it, I think that would be better received by the public.
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, thank you very much, Angela.
Thank you.
Next, we have two more cards. Danielle Jones. Handheld. Is the regular microphone going to work here, or do we need a handheld?
He's going to go see if we can find a handheld.
Okay.
It should be.
Maybe we can pick the microphone up and move it?
I can even scoot out of my chair.
Okay.
I can
Stop. Talk loud.
Okay.
Okay.
Welcome, Danielle. I think we can hear you, but
Hang on, I'm gonna this. I'd like to thank Connie and Mary for coming from the NFB, because that's who we are helping to. We're the blind fighting for the blind. The blind representing the blind. Why I'm concerned is I know there's some students who go from Mesa over to the two centers for the blind, the two different training centers. They know they will be affected, and I know one of them, she's thinking it's going to cost her $60 each way to go there. So that's one thing that's pretty concerning. Because right now it only costs her $8, and it's going to cost her $60 per day. So, and there's just a lot of issues, I think, and those of us who are in wheelchairs are going to have a hard time because from what I've heard, the provider that does the taxis, the cabs, don't know how to handle people who are in wheelchairs. They don't strap them down right and stuff, so I think that's a big issue. And the transfers, like I'm visually impaired, and if I go to a transfer by myself, I've gotten lost before, and I've had to call somebody to say, hey, I need some help, I'm lost. And it's kind of hard getting around. So we just need to help. I think one thing that people need to remember is let's put away your car keys and see how far you can get around in the city. Just see. Can't get very, very far. So we still have to figure out some things for our members and those who are losing their vision. And TransDev has been very hard to work. I agree with Angela with the contract that they are very hard to work with. So, are there any questions from me? And I'm representing the NFB of Arizona, so I can help with anything. The National Federation of the Blind of Arizona, so I can help with anything.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Any questions for Danielle? All right, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Next, Marcia Schmidt.
Hi, my name is Marcia Schmidt. Sorry. And I lived a couple blocks near, well, just south of the Arts Center. I'm here for a couple of reasons. 3 years ago in January, I got shoved into this situation. Thanks to somebody who didn't do their job, I ended up in emergency brain surgery. So I can no longer drive. And just as others have said, throw away your car keys and see how far you get. It was 6 months before I could travel by myself, and to have access to the paratransit was a little bit getting my life back. I rely on this service to get to my job. I live at downtown Mesa. I work in Phoenix. I haven't even been able to get a clear understanding of whether I would even be able to use that, whether you're going to continue to participate in the regional so that I can get to my job every day. I have tried everything. I've tried Ride Choice. Ride Choice has left me sitting anywhere from 1 to 3 hours with absolutely no concern about the fact that they're leaving somebody sit with no. I had one night I called for a ride. I had taken, because I've tried everything. Especially when it took me 2 years to get back to my job. I went through the training at the Foundation for Blind Children so I could get the technical support and training so that I could get back to my job, because when I try to read, everything mushes together. I have no peripheral vision, so I can't drive. I've tried everything. One of the first things that I tried when I got back to my job was to try to use Ride Choice to see if that would work. I have to get a ride from my work into Tempe before I can even try it. Then I would call and I would have them drop me at a Starbucks there. I would call for a ride and they would leave me sit. And they would say, well, it could be an hour, it could be 2 hours. One night I sat there for 2.5 hours. After the first 30 minutes, I call every 15 minutes. At the 2.5 hour mark, they said, let me see if we can, they tried 2 other drivers and they came back and said, we don't have any cars in the area. With absolutely no apology, no sense of urgency, no offer of any kind of recourse. By that time, fortunately, Uber had gone down to $8, so I was able to get home that way. But I have some central vision. When I got home that night, then I got a robocall, and they said, saying that your car was ready. And I called them and I said, are you out of your pea-picking little mind? You think I'm going to sit there in the cold for 3 hours waiting for you to show up when you couldn't even tell me whether you could get me a car or not? And that has been the experience I had with Ride Choice. Now, December 1st, Lyft was added to that. Lyft has made an appreciable difference, but it's still expensive. If I want to go from my house to Superstition Springs, that in effect doubles my cost to go out to Superstition Springs. If I wanted to use Ride Choice to go to my work, Well, they might take me to my work, but I can't use it to come back. I also haven't heard a lot of concern about safety issues, and there are people that are going, using paratransit for chemo, they're using it for dialysis, they have macular degeneration, where they may or may not even have any vision out the corners of their eyes. I'm not seeing a lot of discussion about that, but this, I can't even get an answer on whether I can continue to use this service to get from my home in downtown Mesa to my job, which is just past the 143 in Phoenix. I've tried everything I could possibly try. I've even tried, against my doctor's recommendation, I even tried using public transit. I have to ride 5 miles on the light rail, and then I have to walk and find a bus stop and ride another 5 miles. And then from the bus stop to my job, there are no sidewalks. I'm carrying a cane. I have no peripheral vision. I have to walk in the street from the bus stop to my job, which is not a safe thing to do, whether it's dark, light, or whatever. So I ended up saying, okay, I'm going to just use paratransit because that is the safest way, and it's the way I can get to work on time. And, you know, if I can't get to work on time, then I can't support myself. 80% of people that are visually impaired are not employed. I'm lucky I have a great employer. I was off work for almost 2 years, and I was able to get back. But there are a lot of people that are trying to support themselves, and they're using this service to get to and from jobs. And when you take that away, they have no independence for a number of reasons. If you take away the transit, then they can't get to their job. Then they can't support themselves. And also, I have a sister who manages a large retirement community in East Mesa. I've been hearing stories ever since she's been there about especially women who all of a sudden their spouses die and they go from a decent income to $1,000 or $1,500 a month, and they're budgeting shampoo. They're not going to be able to afford a double, and say if you're paying $4 on paratransit, all of a sudden you have to pay $8 on Ride Choice. So I didn't think I was going to get emotional. I'm sorry. But I just think that, you know, up until 3 years ago, I was independent, drove, took care of myself, no problem. All of a sudden, I'm shoved into this situation. I ride with Connie occasionally. So she was the one who was saying, you know, she can read. Yeah, with one eye sometimes, but there are limitations and there are costs. And I had a feeling that probably the reason this was coming down was because of a lack of budget. Because I've lived in Mesa almost the entire time that I've lived in Arizona, and I'm aware of no property tax, and so therefore the amount of money that the city has to deal with is limited because of that. I could probably function on an extension of 15 miles for most things, but again, the question is Mesa going to continue to participate in the regional so I can get to work? I have other meetings that I go to that are like up in North Phoenix. If that's taken, if I can't use the regional, then I can't do those meetings because it's going to cost me bare minimum $60 one way to go to a meeting like that.
Jody, can you answer that question?
Yes. If you currently take paratransit to get to work this week, last month, you should be able to use that again now. I'll have Ed Jones, the guy in the second row here, on my staff, he'll get your information, and we will get you an answer today. But I believe, now I'm getting emotional. But I believe that what you said, because if you live in downtown Mesa and you go to work over off the 143 by the airport, you should be fine. You can still take paratransit.
Because I don't always get there on time, but again, I work for a really good company.
Right. And, you know, paratransit, one of the challenges with paratransit is it can't take any longer for you to take a paratransit trip than it does if you were to take the same trip on this. So that's part of the scheduling challenges and some of the frustration that people have. But Ed will get your information, and we'll confirm for you today that you can still take that trip.
Okay. All right, is Mesa going to continue to participate in the regional?
Yes, the regional is not an opt-in or opt-out. If you provide paratransit, I hope it's okay if I keep answering, that if we provide paratransit, you automatically provide the regional transit, we provide the regional option. So I know you look at it as an option. For us, it's not. It's just part of the paratransit service. So if you're in the paratransit service area, you can take it in any paratransit service area in Mesa, Scottsdale, Phoenix, Chandler, Glendale, Peoria, wherever that goes.
The other thing is with Ride Choice, I only have 10 rides. So I use everything that I can. If Lyft offers a discount
Right.
other than Ride Choice, if Uber offers a discount, they used to do a ride pass, but they haven't done that for months. I use everything that I can. I use Dial a Ride, Dial a Brother, whatever I can. but my brother loses patience. And,
They do that.
Right.
I have a sister in Chandler, but, they have to come up.
Let's have you, again, I'm putting this on Ed. Let's have you talk to Ed, because Ed will be able to help you figure out what are the best options for when you should take paratransit, what are the best options for when you should take Ride Choice, so you can maximize your trip options that way.
But I
Marcia,
really,
thank you for coming. I think the good news is because of your proximity to light rail and to transit, that what we're talking about today should have no impact on you.
well, I've tried everything. And I'll tell you what, if the light rail went all the way, then it's not a bad option.
Right.
But I've been on there where it's been really crowded and people
Sure.
sit in the handicap spots. I've even seen them sit in the handicap spots when there's somebody in a wheelchair
Right.
who's been forced to sit in the access space instead of moving. And
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that you use light rail. I'm just saying that because you're within the federally mandated area, that the changes that we're discussing today
Okay.
do not impact you at all.
Okay, but
And so I know you've got a challenging situation, and things aren't going to get easier for you, but I think things are not going to change for you.
Well, it's not just me, though, and I'm thinking about those little old ladies that live in my sister's community who are, rationing shampoo, and all of a sudden, how are they going to get to a doctor's appointment or anything like that? So I don't know that anybody's brought that kind of thing up, but, it might be a good idea to talk to some of those retirement communities, the managers there, because they're the ones who end up getting the calls, getting the people coming into her office looking for help. And just, I'm stubborn, so and I'm independent, so I do everything I can to take care of myself. But there are other people who just don't have that ability.
Okay, thank you very much, Marcia.
Okay,
Appreciate
thank
you
you.
coming out today. All right, council, this, just for purposes of scheduling our time, Mr. Brady, what would be the impact of continuing agenda item 2B, the discussion about scooters? Do we need to resolve that today?
No,
you think?
no.
So maybe
They're still out there, and they'll still.
maybe we table that till Monday. I know that there are some folks here to talk about that topic as well, but I think several people.
Yeah, we could do
have
that.
other-
We could just schedule that for Monday at
Okay.
5 o'clock, I guess.
Okay, great. So I apologize if you're here to talk about the scooter issue. We're going to bump that till right before our council meeting on Monday. So thank you for being here, but I think this is going to take a little while to resolve as well.
This is the provider.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, so we're not done with this item. But I just want to let the people that are here on the other item know that we're going to continue to talk about this. So again, I'll give, well, Mr.
Just, Mayor,
Brady.
just as a reminder, this is, again, we're having this conversation now because it wouldn't take effect till July. So we are, hopefully in our thoughts, that still gives us with direction, lots of time to go and continue the conversation. And because I think there's a lot of concerns and complaints about the existing system. Well, I don't know we can change, we're not changing the existing system. And obviously there's some feedback here that we can continue to having conversations with Valley Metro. The council member and I both sit on different committees there. I think we're trying to get Scott Smith to come visit. So it is a challenge. It's across the whole region. And remember, these are regional systems. This is a regional system that we are opting into. We don't provide these services we don't contract with Lyft or paratransit by ourselves. They are regional contracts across the entire system. The question here today is just really that 3/4 mile alignment, and that's what we're seeking for to kind of move forward, because I think then that continues on to the Metro Board. There's still more steps that'll take place.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we could have a hearing on the status of paratransit and spend hours hearing a lot of stories from folks about the challenges that they're experiencing.
But then this council doesn't, and this council really doesn't approve contracts or has those relationships, yeah.
So a couple of my takeaways, Jody, please help me. It does seem like the advent of rideshare is a blessing and a curse in this situation. We now have, to answer the question of, take away my car keys, frankly, I think I'd be okay because of Lyft and Uber and rideshare options now. The world is changing. And so we have ubiquitous cars driving around ready to pick us up at a moment's notice. So that's good for all of us. It's good as far as accessibility of transportation. It's good for handicapped folks as well, but it seems like there are stories of if you just have a regular Lyft driver that's summoned to a scene to provide service to someone who is disabled, that's not a perfect match. Is there any way, is it just the garden variety Lyft driver that's showing up to help people under the ride choice scenario?
I believe it is, but we can follow up with Valley Metro. I mean, it's not like let me back up a little bit. Lyft does do, according to the drivers I've talked to, Lyft does do some training. I don't know what agreement the vendor that operates with Lyft, operates the ride choice service, has made in a service agreement with Lyft. So we can go back and follow up with that. But I always encourage anybody, whether they have an experience on paratransit or ride choice or bus or light rail, to call the Valley customer service number or call me, and we can track it down, especially if it's a paratransit and ride choice issue. We can follow that up and work on getting some of those issues resolved.
Okay, so yeah, I would encourage additional discussion with Valley Metro about the lack of training perhaps for a generic Lyft driver versus someone who has an asterisk next to their name that gets routed these types of more challenging calls. Next question I have is the July 1st issue, and Mr. Brady's already indicated that's not set in stone. But obviously, my takeaway from this is we've got a lot of one-off situations that require hand-holding and assurances and personal consultations. Do you think we can accomplish that with a July 1st transition deadline?
We will give it our try. The challenge, again, is if we don't do July 1, then we have to push. We're not the only ones implementing stuff. So on July 1, there's some changes to paratransit in other parts of the Valley that, for Valley Metro staff purposes, it just makes it cleaner to do it all at one time. If we choose to push it out, Valley Metro would ask that we did it October 1.
Okay. So we've got 4 months plus to work with all of these individual situations, and it sounds like Mr. Brady's ready to give you additional resources as far as humans to help you with this. In my mind, I think that the challenge that's before us is that the status quo has changed. Previous to this point, we could err on the side of being generous to the disabled community, and we were going above and beyond what we needed to do. And that's great. When we can do that, we should do that. But I think the situation has shifted in that we frankly just can't do that anymore. We're talking of millions of additional dollars coming out of the general fund to continue that very generous program. And so I do think that something's got to change. And this will result, I'm sure, in some inconvenience in some individual situations and some additional cost to the folks that are receiving the service. It should be pointed out, though, that there's still an enormous subsidy being being provided by the city in this situation. So the city is not uncaring or not offering substantial financial assistance to the folks that are in this situation. So I think we do need to go forward with making the transition. It's going to need to be with a lot of hand-holding, as we've talked about, and I think maybe staff needs to come back to us in a couple of months into us and tell us how it's going, whether you feel like you're going to be able to not have people sitting on street corners for hours in wheelchairs. If we make this change, under no circumstances is that okay with anybody. I think we all understand that. But I think it is important that we do move forward and do this in a very compassionate and individual hand-holding basis. Mr. Thompson.
Mayor, I agree. I'm fine moving forward with this. I just want to make sure that staff has the ability to work with our ADA community and help them, especially when they're this is so new to a lot of people. And if we need to hold people's hands to help walk them through this process to make it easier for them so that they understand what's happening, then I'm okay with that. But I agree with the mayor. I think, I would like to have staff come back within the next, 3 months or so and give us an update on how it's progressing and before we fully commit.
I think you saw our staff knows many of these individuals and has a relationship with them, and so I think they're very much concerned about their friends also and making this work, so.
Thank you. Mr. Freeman.
I don't know if Frankie did. Yep. The implementation of these programs, I think one of the things I heard is even though you've done great communication and outreach to a lot of people and the users, maybe we need to tweak something to get out, especially to the vision impaired population. And thank you to them for their comments. And I agree to move forward. I think you're saying you're expanding it by 3/4 of a mile.
We're bringing the map that says, instead of being citywide, it will be at 3/4 of a mile from the existing transit routes.
From the existing, yeah, so
Okay.
we're realigning it inward, if you will.
And I think having everybody who uses the system understand how it works, paratransit versus rideshare, vice versa. And then, as you mentioned, others that use the system to go way far out of our area to other areas of the city and valley. I think helping them negotiate that and navigate that's important. So I suggest moving forward with that. Thank you.
I'll just add, for us, being the representative at the Valley Metro, making sure, I myself, do the due diligence and asking those questions for my concerns with the customer service and training and those pieces. So moving into a ride choice program, like you all have my commitment to ask those detailed questions of Valley Metro to ensure that folks are not left behind or experiencing these problems that we heard today or that we haven't heard, right? So.
Thank you. I think if Frankie and Jody can push that question of, are we just having a regular Lyft driver is okay for me, but not okay for the folks that we just heard from. So I think we do need to ask those questions. Other comments? Okay, I think it's fairly clear to me we have a consensus to move forward. Do we need a motion on this, Mr. Smith?
I think he would like to.
Okay. Is there a motion to adopt staff's recommendations?
So moved.
Thank you. Second? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Mayor, we'll come back to you. So it's March, April, May, June, July. So maybe split 2 months. How would that be? Come back? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just there's certain things that I would like to see when you guys come back are
Okay.
the statistics in regards to, when they pick up the phone to dial ride choice, one of the things that we heard was that somebody had sat there for 3 hours. If it's possible to see what those times are when they actually call for ride choice and how long is it actually taking for somebody
And we
to
hope
respond?
that since December that's changed, but we can check on
Right.
that.
Yeah, we'll check. And some of them, there's this is nuances, and some they may book their trip at 11 and say they don't need it to 4. So there could be a wide variance of that. But we'll look at from dispatch to, see if we can look at something from dispatch to arrive.
Oh, that's right. You said it has to be booked in how many hours?
Well, the Dial Ride paratransit has to be booked 24 hours in advance. Ride Choice is on demand, so there's some Ride Choice trips that I've been told people book in the morning for a later afternoon pickup, or they call right when they need it. So we'll get you some information on that. I just have to,
Okay. Yeah, I think that sounded like one of the bigger issues
Yeah.
that I would like to see, so.
Does Veo participate in this? I see other users.
they do not, no.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And I know there's been a lot of staff work on this topic going back many months, if not years. So thank you for the compassionate way you've approached this. We appreciate it. Again, we are going to table item 2B. That's again, a very, an issue that's going to take a lot of time and attention. Do you think a 5 o'clock start is going to be good enough?
And Mayor, what we're hoping to accomplish there is we're taking the feedback from the prior study session we had on the scooters, and we've now kind of created more of an outline. We haven't drafted the ordinance because we still want to make sure we've got the business points, if you would, and identify those areas. The boundary where we're proposing to start off with is included in that. So we want to get confirmation on those points first, and once we do, then we would go and start drafting the ordinance, then come back with the actual ordinance for council to consider. So there's still more discussion to take place.
I would just say.
Do you want to start earlier then? I'm fine with.
I think 5 o'clock would do it, but I just want to, unless there's other items on that agenda.
No, no, there's nothing
Yeah.
else on that study
Okay.
session, other than just the agenda itself, so. Right?
Well, I could see that we might start the regular council meeting a little later than 5:45.
Yeah, and it's you just went through the agenda,
Yeah.
this council agenda, it's not very long, so if we had to go a little bit later, it probably wouldn't be a big deal.
I think let's stick at 5, just because there's also other meetings that might need to get turned around if we went too much earlier than that.
Okay?
Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda then is item 3, to hear reports on meetings and conferences attended. Anything you'd like to share with us, Mr. Thompson?
Well, Mark and I, or Councilmember Freeman and I, attended the Cactus League Luncheon Kickoff. There was probably, 200 people there, I'm guessing. It was pretty well attended, and so a lot of fun listening to some of the Cactus League inductees, Robin Yount and Fergie Jenkins, some of those guys, get up and talk about baseball in the old days, and it was pretty cool listening to them. Bob Uecker is always a cut up and a laugh. So a lot of fun, and looking forward to spring training. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get that in today. So we were supposed to be the kickoff to spring training in Mesa today, and that's not, I don't think, going to happen. So hopefully we'll do it Saturday if the fields will dry out. So.
Thank you. Mr. Freeman?
Along with that, Councilmember Thompson, the Mesa Historical Museum played an integral part. They were giving up awards there to a lot of the recipients. So it was nice to see Mr. Natker there and the other team members and board members. So that was a great positive influence. We also went to the Queen Creek State of the Town address last night, the mayor and I. The mayor Ubered me out there. And we had he was my ride, so. Yeah. But we were able to listen to their State of the Town address, and it was very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else you'd like to share with us? All right, then the last item is to schedule future meetings. Mr. Brady?
I don't really have anything to add when we just talked about we'll have a study session at 5, a council meeting on Monday, and hopefully we'll have an opening spring training game on Saturday with the Cubs, so we'll see.
All right. Well, yeah, let's all pray for no rain. That seems odd. We enjoy the rain around here. All right, thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting? Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.